Hello, sports bettors. Welcome back to the 10 here on the Bet Rivers Sports Network. We have a huge college basketball show to get to today. I'm your host, Greg Waddell. That's Doug Kezirian, and we will get through every big game in the middle of the week that is left in this conference. We'll also do some quick recaps of the chaos in the Big Ten Conference last night. But first, before we start, I do have to tell you about our weekly college basketball profit boost promotion. Bet Rivers is giving out college basketball profit boosts from 20% to 50% throughout the week for live wagers on Tuesday, same game parlays on Wednesday, and regular parlays on Thursday. You can see the Bet Rivers app for more details. Before we start to get to some Wednesday and Thursday games in the Big Ten Conference, thought it'd be a good time, kind of the midway point of the conference season, to maybe take a pulse check on things, both framed through what we saw and learned last night, and then also maybe from a futures perspective. Last night we had Nebraska with no rank mast as 11-point underdogs go to Ann Arbor and nearly win the game. Lead for over 30 minutes of that game before Michigan survived in the final minute. Simultaneously, Michigan State against the worst team in the conference, Rutgers, on the ropes. But in overtime, they pull away, keeping the loss column at 1 for our four-way tie between Illinois, Nebraska, Michigan, and Michigan State. You may notice Purdue, not in that group of 4. The preseason favorite goes down for their third straight loss last night to their rival Indiana on Kurt Signetti Appreciation Night. So we are starting to see some dominoes fall in terms of who the true contenders are in this league. But Doug, I'll just pose it to you broadly. What did you learn last night?
I always believed it. I shouldn't say always, but the last couple weeks I believed it. But Indiana's for real. They obviously don't have the size Michigan does, but neither do a lot of teams. But their offensive sets are so elaborate. They play a lot of effective and efficient basketball with their free throw shooting, their three-point shooting. They're going to be in a lot of games. And I think they also have a swagger, for lack of a better word, that they're not going to just back down to the traditional powers or the teams that were expected to win the conference coming into the season. So given they were down 2 of their best players, I was really impressed with how the Hoosiers hung around. And I've also been equally, and I've been thinking this the last, 3-4 games, that Michigan's just not that great. Their best is really, really good, but we haven't seen that since November, December. So I don't know. The Wolverines have failed to cover 7 straight. Now, a couple of those were by a point or 2, but I just think the market is way too high on Michigan. I'm going to excuse the Michigan State performance because that was a look-ahead spot to their rivalry game this weekend. So I kind of anticipated it'd be a tough first half. I didn't anticipate it'd be overtime. But either way, I think we kind of know who the teams are. The problem is the value on Nebraska is gone at plus 300. I just don't think you can play it. I don't think you can play Michigan at minus 125 either because I don't think they're the best team. So I guess that by default, that brings us to Sparty at plus 700. I don't know. I go back and forth. So it's going to be fascinating down the stretch. But I came away with it even more impressed, I guess, with Nebraska.
Yeah, that's the same as me. I thought the story of last night, obviously there's chaos kind of simultaneously in those 3 games with Michigan, Michigan State, and Purdue all in action. But I thought the story last night was a Nebraska team that you could have forgiven if they show up to Ann Arbor knowing Rank Mast and Braden Frager are both going to be unavailable. And if they just sort of laid down and died. And I know that's not what this team stands for. They're impeccably well coached. They are so poised. They're connected. They play together on both ends. They're unselfish. They rarely make mistakes. But rank mass is just so important to what they do. And I thought it would be so important against Michigan to stretch out a Daimara and the Michigan Bigs for them to just really look like they didn't even need him to win that basketball game. I know they didn't win, but it just was wildly impressive to me. I thought he was one of the more irreplaceable players in the conference. And for one night, it didn't look like they need him. I do agree with your point. Michigan is overpriced, both in a futures market, also just at a national perspective on a game-by-game lens right now. This is 7 straight games Michigan has failed to cover. If you sort by Bart Torvik's by date, I guess, category here, since January 1st, Michigan is 10th in the country. Not first, not second. So, look, I don't think the sky's falling to say they're playing bad. They're the 10th best team in the country is still a pretty good level for the Wolverines. But in terms of just game by game, they're favored by 10 to 16 against anybody, against good teams in this league. That doesn't feel like it is warranted at this point. I am looking ahead to that rivalry game on Friday night, Michigan and Michigan State. It's going to probably have a huge say in who ends up winning this league. And I would point this out before we do a full breakdown of that game on Friday on this show. Michigan State at 7-1 to win this league, as they sit here tied with Michigan, Illinois, and Nebraska. And they have the Wolverines at home, and they've looked better than the Wolverines for the better part of the last month. That price is going to change like crazy if the Spartans just win that game at home. It sounds like it's going to be around to pick them. But I think if you want to fire on Michigan State, if you're thinking about it at all, really good time to do so before that game on Friday. Get that 7-1 price at Bet Rivers on the Spartans to win the league. Is there anybody else you would look at with their price right now in the futures market that you think makes sense to potentially take a shot on?
Be the one, as I mentioned. I guess, I mean, I've made worse bets than UCLA at 200-1. But you need too much help just because they have a doable stretch coming up. And, you get that, and then you get carnage elsewhere. I mean, winning at Oregon, then home to Indiana, Rutgers, and Washington. I mean, that's doable 4-0. And then all of a sudden you see what the top of the conference is, but then you go to Chrysler Arena and then Sparty. But who knows where Michigan is, right? Injuries happen. And I would say that would be the only one, because then they host Nebraska later on in the season. So that would be the only one running the table. But if you're going to do that, you can just do a rollover parlay. But it's not as binary as that, because you can have one loss in there. Again, things have to break your way, but it's also 200-1.
With all these one-loss teams about halfway through the season, I look at schedules. Both Michigan and Michigan State and Nebraska have a gauntlet coming up here in February. To me, the number you're looking for at the end of the season here is who can go 16-4 in conference play. Now, you mentioned UCLA. I don't hate that number. I don't. For them, they would need to, I think that would be 9-1 down the stretch of conference play. But as you said, they've got a favorable schedule to potentially make a run and do so. The other one I would look at that tier, it sounds crazy given how many people are jumping off this bandwagon right now. Purdue just dropped from 3-1 to 30-1. And Purdue is going to host Michigan and Michigan State and Indiana in Mackey Arena in the next month. They've got two very winnable games in their next two. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I can't really imagine thinking we would get a price as good as 30-1 on this team preseason. They are 17-4. I mean, they're playing terrible right now. They have a lot to figure out, but I think their schedule is going to be more favorable than the other favorites here. And there's a world we look up in 2 or 3 weeks, shocked that we ever had a chance to get the Boilermakers at 30-1. Okay, let's pivot our attention to some games that are upcoming this week, starting with tonight's slate, where we begin with Eric Musselman's USC Trojans on the road at Ben McCollum's Iowa Hawkeyes. It's Hawks minus 10.5, our total at 141.5. What do you think?
Well, I like to fade teams that get the big win on the front end of the travel. But the problem is I also faded them against Wisconsin. I just didn't think they could execute down the stretch, and obviously get another score to go for 35 plus. That's going to happen. And Whiskey wet the bed after being up 12 points in the second half. I think Iowa, look, if you need action on the game, maybe Iowa in a money line parlay piece, but there's no real line value in the actual price you're going to use in the parlay. It's like betting a minus 400, UFC parlay. Like, just the parlay doesn't go up that much when you add it to the parlay. I just don't think 10.5 you can lay here. The Trojans have the ceiling or the upside to hang with any team at times. You just don't know if one of their studs is going to go off. I just don't think they're professionally mature or polished enough to handle their business. And the Hawkeyes have been on a nice run, but some of that is opponent adjusted. But again, I just don't think USC can hang on the East, the Midwest with the snowstorm and everything, just kind of hang around on the road and go into, Carver and take care of business. It's just I don't want USC, but I can't lay that number with Iowa.
Yeah, I've sworn off all things USC thanks to being tired of predicting which Chad Baker Mazara will show up. I've
Right.
also sworn off the word parlay since we just needed Wisconsin money line this weekend to cash our best bet parlay. And it couldn't happen because Chad Baker Mazara decided to be dominant at the Kohl Center when nobody thought that would happen with a weird travel spot. I think this is a lot of points. If USC plays their best, I think it's not nearly enough points if USC plays their worst. I will say this. I think a Ben McCollum team stylistically is going to cause problems to the personnel on this USC team. You've got to be very patient, very disciplined, willing to mentally endure these long 30-second possessions. And I just don't think that tracks with who USC has been for most of the season. So it's a lean to Hawkeyes minus 10.5 for me, but certainly not a number that feels favorable to put at the top of my card. Let's go next to Minnesota at Wisconsin. It is a bounce back spot here for the Badgers. You could get Minnesota at 3-1 on the money line as an underdog, but Badgers minus 8.5, or our total being 146.5. What do you think?
Probably a decent bounce back spot for Whiskey, but I think it's too many points. Minnesota's starting to play well. I love their coach. I think 8.5 is a little too much, but Wisconsin's kind of a no-fly zone as well, like the Trojans. You just don't know which version of the Badgers you're going to get. And when that's the case, you got to be careful. Again, when you have teams that rely on the shooting like they do, you can be up 12 at home and have all the momentum because you were down at halftime. And if you just go cold and the other, it's painful. Now, look, that can be said about any team because we don't know what's going to happen in any game. I get it. But if I had to play this game, I would take the points with the Gophers.
I think there's no team in this league that I've had a worse read on situationally game to game this year than the Wisconsin Badgers. Feels like every time I play them as a best bet, it goes south, and I'm just totally wrong. And I'm going to be on the Badgers tonight. And I don't feel good about it given that history. But I think this is a pretty simple spot bet for me with two teams we've already seen play each other once. And Wisconsin did emerge with a 3-point victory at the Barn. For me, this is an ultimate bounce back spot from a Wisconsin team that had a complete egg stinker, no-show loss at home against a Minnesota team that I think is reeling, has lost 5 straight games, and really for the first time this season, looked like they got their heart ripped out of them. They've played some of the best teams in this conference incredibly well. Close games against Illinois, close game against Wisconsin, like I said earlier this season at home, overtime games, USC and Ohio State. But that second half against Nebraska, where they have a 6-point lead and they essentially get ran off of their home floor, I think that's one of those 20-minute stretches that can linger and become 2 straight mistakes. And Wisconsin is a team we know if they're making shots, they can pour it on from outside. This just feels like a spot bet where Boyd and Blackwell get going, get some 3-point positivity coming off the loss. And Minnesota, I think if you can jump on them early, they're susceptible to maybe getting ran out of the building for the second consecutive game. Let's go next down the list here to another Wednesday night game. This one, a matchup between two of our West Coasters, UCLA against Oregon. Mick Cronin's Bruins favored by 4.5 on the road here. Our total is 135.5. What do you like?
Well, interesting things here. This line opened 2.5, now up to 4.5. I think that's the right number. 2.5 was definitely on the short side. I do expect Oregon to play tough here. You remember we saw a strong performance from the Ducks, who actually led at halftime against Michigan about a week and a half ago, and they're still without Shellstead and Biddle. So I just think Dana Altman's comments after the loss, they just lost by 15 at Washington, talked about the rebounding, and the Huskies out-rebounded them 45-23. I expect Oregon to play with a lot of fire and a lot of intensity, and they could even win this game. I know I just got done talking about UCLA 200-1, but I think there's a favorable kind of angle to Oregon. We've seen this a lot, teams that on home court, UCLA off a big weekend, right? They take down Purdue and win the next game against Northwestern. I think the under is the play. Now, this one was 141.5, come down a few points, but I still think it's a strong play. Oregon's gone under 5 straight. They have poor shooting without Biddle and Shellstad, and then UCLA's gone under in 6 of 7. So the trends just scream under, and it's gone under 6 points, but I still think it's way too high. And I think the key is the rebounding. That's what Altman picked out. The Ducks ranked dead last in the Big Ten in allowing offensive rebounding. So if they crash the boards, then there's going to be fewer second chance points. I think the Bruins are going to play fine defensively against a limited Ducks offense. So this is just a big total, all things considered.
I like the angle on the under. I think that's a great read and a great just sort of situational scout given schemes with these teams and personnel that are available for it. I'm going to also be playing UCLA -4.5 here. It's another pretty simple fade Oregon spot. I do think UCLA is a little bit undervalued overall right now. They're following the exact same formula they did a year ago where they look so bad early in the conference season. Mick Cronin pours gasoline all over his star players, and then they come home against an easy portion of the schedule where they only have to go on West Coast road trips, and they rattle off 7 straight wins, and suddenly they look good. I think we're right in the middle of that right now. I look at Oregon this year. This is one of those weird times, which happens quite a bit, where you look at a Ken Pom projection of this game. UCLA is favored by 2. Well, that's because Ken Pom doesn't know that Jackson Shellstad and Nate Biddle aren't playing in this game. They're not. This game to me is UCLA.
Why don't they adjust that? I mean, they're such an advanced site, right?
They've got to figure that out, and there are ways to sort of filter around it. But just in general, it's like the profile of Oregon, who they've been all season, doesn't really factor in what personnel are on or off. It's just what they've produced on the court. So these last 5 games without Biddle and Shellstad, they technically factor in, but they factor into about 20% of how Oregon's valued, given they played for most of the beginning of the year. Look, point being here, Oregon's played 11 games against Ken Pom top 100 opponents. 9 of them have been decided by double digits, and they've lost all 11 of them. They just have not shown a caliber that is warranted that they can hold up against an opponent of UCLA's ability level. So give me the Bruins -4.5. And hopefully those trends continue. There are 2
You expect to be down at halftime.
Yeah, you can always expect that. It's guaranteed. You know what? Maybe we'll go Oregon first half, UCLA full game.
Ooh, a little double result there.
Yeah, a little reverse correlation play right there. I wonder
you can do the double result, just money line, right? Like who wins each half kind of thing or whatever it is. Who's the winner at the end of the half? Because there's 3-way betting. There's the tie. Sometimes you can do that game prop. That could be an angle too. I just think Oregon's kitchen sink is coming at the Bruins in this game.
Yeah, that's probably fair. All I'd point out,
they don't have the talent, so
that's I think it was a kitchen sink game too against like the 2 Michigan schools and ended up like 10, 16 point. Now those teams are better than UCLA, so don't get me wrong. But okay, we'll see. I think I landed where I want to land there. 2 games on Thursday. Penn State at Northwestern, the first one. We've got projected lines for you here. Northwestern -7.5 at home, total 152.5. Both these teams could use just something to feel good about, Doug.
Feels like too high of a number. I would have made this like 6, and I know Ken Pom has 8, and Penn State's not good. But either is Northwestern. And I know it's going to be a game that no one's going to want to watch. And I probably won't either, but it feels like a little too high of a number. And sometimes we see these numbers and we think, oh, it's high for a reason. It's a blowout. That's really only when it's a really good team against another good team or something like that. The number, I think, just it feels off. I think it's a 5.5, 6, should be the right number. But I just think there's better things to do with my money than back Penn State in this situation. But there's no way I'm laying it with the Purple Cats.
Yeah, better things to do with your money is a good way to term this. Maybe better things to do with your time, your personal life. Watch this game another way.
Sadly, I'm not sure. Yeah,
I have a gut feel here. It's not going to be a play from me, no way. But I kind of lean to the over just because Penn State's defense has been rapidly falling apart. They're down to 226th in the country, giving up 96 to Maryland, 98 to Wisconsin, and then 84 to Ohio State. But that game finished with 162 points against the Buckeyes. Now, those are teams that I think have a little more offensive firepower than Northwestern. However, Northwestern at home, Martinelli can get you 30 against a terrible defense, and they're probably looking up thinking this is one of those spots we can execute and play well. So it's a gut feel, like I said. I just think this is a game both teams are not going to approach from a defensive-oriented standpoint, and 2 teams that in that building can maybe catch fire and carry us to a big high total when no one expects it to be an entertaining game. What should be an entertaining game Illinois hosting Washington in an all-time sandwich spot here. The Illini, coming off of their amazing victory in Mackey Arena, hearing about how great they are for 6 days before they host a dead Danny Sprinkle Washington team 2 days before going to Lincoln against a team they already lost to that is tied with them for first place in the Big Ten standings. As far as treacherous spots go, this is the biggest treacherous spot to me ever. The only thing is, I don't know if Washington has anything they can do to stop this high-powered Illini attack right now. What do you think?
You hit the nail on the head. It is the worst sandwich spot, like you said, working the press clippings, things like that. But the problem is Washington, what they sort of lean on and everything is just not going to be advantageous against the Illini. I don't think their size and the guys getting back healthy is this huge advantage. So I just can't get behind grabbing the points if it's only going to. Now, it depends what it is, right? If we get north of 15, yes, give me the points. But if it's going to be around 13, I don't want any part of it. I do think the Huskies can hang around, but the firepower is just too strong there for the Illini, although they're shorthanded too. But I'm not laying it, but I'm not running to the window to grab it either. I think it's going to be right around the number. I think it's a sharp line.
Yeah, I think there will be a point or should be a point at minimum where there is value somewhere with these Illinois pregame lines given Kylan's injury. I just don't think it's been overly adjusted yet. Now, I thought we were getting value on Purdue at home this weekend, and then Keaton Wagler scores 46, and I feel stupid. So, I just have so much respect for what this Illinois team has become. I think they're a national title contender. I think they've handled their business impeccably well. This is not the Brad Underwood teams of the last 3-4 years where there's always some sort of self-inflicted adversity in the locker room. This team is mature, they're poised, they're unselfish, and I do think they're probably one of the more trustworthy teams to handle a spot like this. On the flip side, you scouted it perfectly. Washington is a team that can compete on the boards, can beat you up inside, but that's just running into a dead end against an Illinois team that has a bunch of great players in the front court and flies around with athletes on the wings. So it's probably a stay away from me just out of respect for the spot. I think if you were going to look for Washington, maybe look Washington first half instead of full game here. But I'm going to stay away from it overall, and we'll see if I change my mind by game time. Okay, that's everything we have for you today. Lots of good hoops midweek here. We'll be back on Friday with another episode, but before we close the show, Doug, what's your best bet for the remainder of the midweek games?
It's frustrating. I think I'm still going to stick with my under. I mean, overnight under 141.5, a lot more desirable than 135.5, but you see that and you're like, what's 6 points? I'm like, that's like 3 minutes of action or 2 minutes of action in a theory. But I'm still going to go with the under just because I don't love anything else. You can maybe convince me to do an alt under and go a little higher and then take a parlay piece, throw Iowa on there as a money line. That's one way to go about it as well.
Ooh, I like that. That's a fun way to go about that. I love that, actually. Okay. I am going to just stick with my gut here. I'm going to take the Bruins -4.5. I don't love that I'm taking a slight road favorite. That's always scary. But I just think this Oregon team is a lot worse than the analytics say they are right now. I think they've basically been mispriced for the better part of 2.5 weeks. And they had some pretty crazy, huge numbers that led to covers against some of the very best teams in this league. Any short number with Oregon right now, I'll take a competent team against right now. So Bruins -4.5 for me. There are our best bets. Thank you to Doug. Thank you to our production team behind the scenes. Reminder, we will be back on Friday to preview that Michigan State game Friday night and the rest of the weekend slate. This show is part of College Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Sports Network 2 times a week for the remainder of college hoop season. You can find us here along with Sports Better's Paradise with Jimmy Ott every single week. Thank you, Doug, as always, and we'll see you again on Friday.